The bottle connected with Uncle Tae-sik's temple with a sound like breaking ice. For one sharp, crystalline moment, Mira felt nothing but the hot flood of survival rushing through her veins. Blood bloomed across his face, dark and immediate, and his hands, those terrible hands that had reached for her with drunken, entitled certainty, fell away from her completely. "You ungrateful little girl," he slurred, staggering backward into the kitchen table. Empty soju bottles clattered and rolled across the floor. "I took you in, fed you, gave you a roof. You owe me everything. Welcome to K-Afro Diary, a home of intriguing stories. Let's continue." Mira's chest heaved. Her fingers were still wrapped around the broken bottle neck. Her work blouse was torn at the shoulder, 2 buttons gone, scattered across the linoleum like small, quiet witnesses. She had come home from a double shift at the convenience store 2 streets over with her earnings folded in her fist. Barely enough, never enough, exhausted down to the marrow, already bracing herself for whatever version of him would be waiting. But not this. Not this particular crossing of a line she had believed. Even now, even after everything, he would not cross. "You owe me your body if you can't give me money," he had said. His breath a wall of cheap liquor and cigarette smoke. His pupils blown wide with something that went beyond alcohol. "What good are you to me otherwise? Your mother left you here. The least you can do is make yourself useful." The memory of his hands on her thighs made her stomach lurch sideways. She had grabbed the first thing within reach and swung with everything her exhausted body had left. Now Uncle Tae-sik touched the wound at his temple, looked at his own blood-stained fingers, and his face rearranged itself into something that no longer resembled the man who had collected her from the airport 7 years ago with a sign bearing her name. "I will kill you," he said. Mira did not wait to find out if he meant it. Ran out of the apartment door, down 4 flights of stairs that smelled of mold and old meals and decades of small desperation, past the broken elevator that had not worked in 3 months, past the flickering corridor light that maintenance had been promising to fix since last winter. Her feet hit the pavement and she ran into the Seoul night, into rain that had begun falling in heavy, indifferent sheets, cold and relentless, washing the streets in reflections of neon and headlights. She had nothing. No phone. Uncle Tae-sik had smashed it 2 weeks ago during a different rage, a smaller one, the kind she had learned to consider manageable. No money. She had dropped her earnings somewhere in the apartment during the struggle. No destination. Just the oldest and most fundamental instruction the body knows. Run. Run until your lungs give out. Run until the city swallows you whole and he cannot find you inside it. She did not know how long she ran. Time dissolved into the rhythm of her own breathing and the slap of her worn sneakers against wet pavement. The city moved around her in blurs, the orange glow of a pojangmaka, the distant sound of traffic, a man outside a convenience store who looked at her once and looked away, deciding quickly and correctly that whatever was happening to this young woman in the rain was not his to involve himself in. When her legs finally stopped obeying her and she bent double on the pavement, retching from the exertion, Mira found herself in a part of Seoul she had never been to. The buildings here were a different species from the ones she knew. Taller, more deliberate, the kind of architecture that announced money not through decoration but through sheer, unhurried confidence. The streets were cleaner. Even the rain seemed to fall more quietly here. And directly in front of her, rising through the downpour like something from the wrong kind of dream, stood a building that was almost entirely glass. The Haewon House. She read the name on the brass plaque by the entrance, the Hangul elegant and unhurried, and had no context for what it meant or who it belonged to. Through the rain-streaked glass she could see warm golden light and the slow, graceful movement of people inside. People in clothes that cost more than she made in 3 months, moving through the space with the particular ease of those who have never once had to calculate whether they could afford to exist somewhere. She should have kept walking. Should have found a subway entrance or a 24-hour cafe or anywhere else to sit out the night and figure out what came next. But she was so cold, so completely empty. And the light through that glass was the warmest thing she had seen in a very long time. The doors were unlocked. She slipped inside. The floor was marble, pale and polished enough that she could see her own reflection looking back up at her. Bruised cheek, torn blouse, hair flattened to her skull, rain still dripping from her fingertips. She looked like exactly what she was. Someone who had no business being here, and who had arrived anyway out of sheer desperation. How did she get in? The whisper came from a cluster of women near an elaborate floral installation at the center of the room. They were immaculate, every single one of them. Gowns, professional hair, the specific kind of beauty that required both wealth and time to maintain. They stared at Mira with expressions that moved across a spectrum from disgust to pity to something closer to alarm. Security should have caught her at the entrance. Is that blood on her face? Mira opened her mouth to apologize, to explain, to back toward the door she had just come through. Then a door at the far end of the room opened and 3 men walked out. They wore black suits that had been made for their bodies specifically, and they moved with the coordinated precision of people who had spent years learning to move that way. The man at the center was perhaps 50, silver threading through his black hair. His eyes doing that thing that certain eyes do, cataloging everything in a room before settling on what matters most. They settled on Mira. The room went quiet. The silver-haired man walked toward her. His footsteps were unhurried and completely certain. Mira's body told her to run again. Her legs had nothing left to give. She stood and trembled as he stopped an arm's length away and studied her with an intensity that made her feel like something being assessed rather than seen. "Your name," he said. His voice was quiet and carried the particular weight of someone who was not accustomed to asking anything twice. "Mira." Her own voice came out smaller than she intended. "What are you doing here, Mira?" I don't know. I was running and I saw the lights and I just..." Her voice cracked somewhere in the middle of the sentence. "I'm sorry. I'll go. You're hurt." It was not a question. His gaze moved across her torn shoulder, her bruised face, the way she was shaking with cold and adrenaline and the accumulated weight of a night that had not finished being terrible yet. "Who did this to you?" "It doesn't matter. It matters to me." Something in his tone made her look up at him directly. There was no pity in his expression, no disgust, just a cold, careful assessment that reminded her, uncomfortably, of someone deciding the value of a thing. "Who?" "My uncle," she heard herself say, and the word tasted like something that had been sitting in her mouth for years waiting to be spat out. "He tried to, I fought back. I ran." The man nodded slowly. Then he turned to face the room at large and spoke in a voice that reached every corner of the space without any apparent effort. "The selection is concluded. This one will carry the successor." The room erupted. The women near the floral installation began speaking over each other, their voices climbing. "You cannot be serious. Look at her, she's nobody. She stumbled in off the street. She's injured. She's a mess. She has nothing. She has exactly what is required," the silver-haired man said, with the calm of someone who has already made a decision and is now simply waiting for the noise to subside. He turned back to Mira. "Someone who knows what survival actually costs. Someone who fights back when cornered. Someone who has not been protected enough to become fragile." He almost smiled. Contained no warmth at all. "Welcome to your new life, Mira. I am Juno, right hand to the iron chair. And you have just been selected to bear his heir." Before she could process those words, before she could ask what they meant or scream, or attempt the run her legs had already decided they could not complete, steady hands guided her through a side door, down a corridor that smelled of expensive cologne and something older underneath it, into an elevator that descended for long enough that she lost track of how deep they were going. When the doors opened, she stepped into a world that should not have existed. The underground compound was enormous. Corridors of stone and steel, recessed amber lighting, the climate-controlled hush of a place that had been designed to be invisible to everything above it. They passed doors she could not read, windows she could not quite see into clearly, and eventually arrived at a medical suite that was cleaner and better equipped than any clinic she had ever visited above ground. "Sit," Juno said. Mira's legs made the decision for her. She sat. A doctor in white scrubs moved around her with practiced efficiency, examining her injuries with gloved hands that were thorough and gentle. "Bruising on the face and left arm," the doctor murmured. "Torn clothing, clear signs of struggle. No sexual trauma." She looked at Juno. Physically, she's intact. She'll need treatment for the bruising and time to recover from the psychological shock. Good. Treat her, prepare a room. She stays until we confirm suitability. Wait. Mira found her voice. Came out steadier than she expected. I don't understand what's happening. What is this place? What do you mean I'm supposed to carry someone's heir? Who is the iron chair? Juno studied her for a moment. Then he nodded to the doctor, who left discreetly, and pulled a chair directly in front of Mira and sat with his elbows on his knees. His hands clasped, looking at her with the expression of a man who is about to explain something complicated to someone he believes is capable of understanding it. The iron chair commands the most significant organized criminal network in South Korea, he said, with the same conversational ease one might use to describe the weather. Construction, logistics, private security, entertainment, real estate, and certain pharmaceutical interests, both licensed and otherwise. His reach extends into China, Japan, and increasingly further. He is not touchable by law enforcement because he owns enough of it and has enough information about the rest to make touching him extremely inadvisable. Mira's mouth had gone completely dry. Every several years, the iron chair requires a successor. Not for sentimental reasons. Power demands continuity. The selection process is rigorous. Women are observed, evaluated, tested. They must be resilient, intelligent, capable of surviving inside a world where weakness is a liability. I work at a convenience store, Mira said. I didn't finish my degree. Have nothing. I am nobody. You survived an abusive household for years, Juno countered, with the patient precision of someone making an argument they have already won. Tonight, when your uncle crossed the final line, you did not freeze. You fought back against a man significantly larger than you. You ran through the streets of Seoul with no money, no phone, no destination. And when you stumbled into a room full of strangers, you didn't beg or perform or try to make yourself appealing. You told the truth. He leaned forward slightly. Every other woman in that pavilion tonight was educated, connected, prepared. They came from wealth or from criminal families seeking alliance. They have been trained for this. But not one of them has ever truly had nothing. Not one of them knows what it actually costs to survive a day at a time with no safety net. The iron chair does not need a woman who has been polished for this role. He needs a woman who will not break when this life tries to break her. He needs someone like you. Mira sat with this. And if I say no? Juno's expression did not change, but something moved through his eyes. Then you walk out of here and return to whatever you were running from. Your uncle. The streets. A life where you have nothing and no protections. You stood. Or you stay. You are protected, provided for, given every resource. Your child will want for nothing. The choice is yours entirely. But it is a one-time offer. If you walk out that door tonight, it does not open for you again. Mira closed her eyes. Uncle Tae-sik's face swam behind them. The apartment. The flickering corridor light. The convenience store job that kept them both afloat while he drank her dry. The years of it. The years of managing him, excusing him, minimizing him to herself, telling herself it was manageable, telling herself she had nowhere else to go because it was true and had always been true. What exactly was she returning to? She opened her eyes. I need to know more, she said. About him. About what you actually expect from me. About what happens after. Juno nodded as though this was precisely the answer he had been waiting for. You'll meet him tomorrow. He explains his own terms. Tonight, rest, eat, heal. You are safe here, Mira. More safe than you have been in a very long time. He moved toward the door, then stopped and looked back. One more thing. Your uncle reported you missing approximately 2 hours ago. He has told the police you attacked him without provocation and stole money before running. He is presenting himself as the victim. The heat that moved through Mira's chest was not surprise. Of course he had. Of course Uncle Tae-sik, who had been refashioning reality to suit himself for as long as she had known him, would do exactly this. She had attacked him. She had ruined his evening. In his version of the story, she owed him an apology. "We can make him disappear," Juno said quietly. "One word. Men like him leave no trace every day in this city." The offer hung between them, terrible and genuinely tempting. "No," Mira said. The firmness in her own voice surprised her. "Not yet. Just keep him away from me." Something in Juno's expression shifted, almost imperceptibly, in the direction of approval. "As you wish." He left. The doctor returned with warm clothes, soft gray cotton, a thick sweater that felt like an extravagance against her skin, and treated her injuries with quiet efficiency. Antiseptic bit at the cuts on her forearms. Ice packs numbed the worst of the bruising. A mild painkiller blunted the throbbing at her temple. When it was done, she was escorted to a room that made something almost like a laugh rise in her throat. It was larger than her entire apartment. A bed that occupied one wall with the confidence of furniture that has never needed to justify its own size, covered in sheets the color of warm sand. A private bathroom with a deep soaking tub. Sitting area. And a wall of windows looking out onto an underground garden. Actual trees and plants growing under carefully calibrated artificial light, impossibly alive this far beneath the city, an oasis that had no right to exist and existed anyway. She should have spent the night planning, mapping exits, constructing escape routes and worst-case scenarios. Instead she lay down on sheets that felt like water against her skin and slept for 14 hours without dreaming once. She woke to food on the tray beside the bed. Rice, soup, 3 small banchan dishes, tea that smelled of ginger and something floral. She ate without fully tasting anything, her mind already beginning to process what the exhaustion of last night had temporarily suspended. She showered until the water ran cold. The mirror showed her the full inventory of Uncle Tae-sik's work, bruises in full bloom across her cheekbone, the inside of her left arm, her ribs, each one a specific shade of purple and yellow that documented exactly how the last 24 hours had gone. She had just finished dressing. The closet had been stocked in her precise size, which should have disturbed her more than it did, when the knock came. "The iron chair will see you now," Juno said. Her stomach dropped. "Now! Now!" She followed him through the compound, noting this time what exhaustion had blurred the night before. Security cameras at every junction. Guards at intervals, all in black, all carrying the specific alertness of people who are paid to notice everything. The whole place had the quality of a fortress that had decided to be comfortable. Power expressed not through intimidation but through sheer, absolute control of every variable. They stopped before a set of double doors made from dark wood inlaid with brushed silver detailing. Juno knocked once, waited 3 seconds and pushed them open. The office was large and deliberately unshowy. Dark furniture, bookshelves that had been used rather than arranged, a desk positioned to face the door. Behind it, lit by the glow of multiple screens showing what appeared to be security feeds from across the city, sat the man they called the Iron Chair. Kang Min-seok was not what Mira had constructed in her mind during the night. She had expected older. She had expected the heavy, blunt physicality of the kind of power her imagination associated with criminal empire. What she found instead was a man in his mid-30s at most, sharp-featured, still in the way of someone who has learned that stillness is more commanding than movement, wearing a plain black shirt with the sleeves pushed to his elbows. His hair fell slightly across his forehead in a way that seemed entirely accidental and probably wasn't. His eyes, when they found her across the room, were the gray of early morning before the light has decided what it wants to be. "Sit," he said. His voice was quiet. Somehow that made it more, not less, authoritative. Mira sat. Her hands were clasped in her lap, and she kept them still by choice rather than by calm. Min-seok opened a folder on the desk and read from it without looking up. Adaeze Mira Okafor, 24 years old. Born in Accra, relocated to Seoul at 17 following her mother's death to live with her maternal uncle, Haewon Tae-sik Park, Korean national, currently unemployed, with documented history of alcohol dependency and 3 prior domestic disturbance calls to his address that resulted in no charges. He looked up. "No criminal record of your own." 1 semester of university before financial hardship forced withdrawal. Currently employed at a convenience store in No-Won-gu, double shifts, supporting a household that only one of you is contributing to. He closed the folder. Unlucky in your family. Exceptionally consistent in everything else. Mira said nothing. There was nothing to add. Juno tells me you refused his offer to have your uncle removed permanently. I don't want him dead, Mira said. I want him gone. There's a difference. Min-seok regarded her for a moment with a particular quality of attention that made her feel she was being read rather than simply observed. Principles. I haven't decided yet whether that's admirable or inconvenient. Why me? The question came out before she could select a more composed way to ask it. All those women last night were everything I'm not. Educated, connected, prepared. Why would you look at me and see anything worth choosing? Min-seok stood and came around the desk, resting against its edge in front of her. The proximity required a specific kind of composure to absorb. Because they came to the Haewon House hoping to be chosen, he said. You came because you were cold and out of options and the light was on. Because they have spent years learning to be what men like me want. You have spent years learning to survive men like your uncle. And because when Juno offered you safety and resources, your first question was not about money or status. It was about what was expected of you. He crossed his arms loosely. I need an heir. Successor. Not a wife in any romantic sense. Not a companion, not a love story. I need a child from a mother who will not fracture under the pressure of this life. Juno believes you are that person. I need to determine if he is right. If I decide he isn't, you leave here with enough money to begin somewhere your uncle will never locate you. That is the alternative. Mira looked at him steadily. And if you decide he is right, what exactly does that mean for me? Artificial insemination. You live here throughout the pregnancy under full medical care. You eat properly, rest, do nothing that endangers the child. After the birth you remain for the first year. After that, a slight pause. We reassess whether you stay or go, whether you want involvement in the child's life or prefer to leave with full financial provision for whatever comes next. The decision will be yours. It was transactional in a way that was almost clarifying. No performance of warmth. No pretended connection. Just the clean lines of an arrangement stated plainly. And if I agree, Mira said slowly, working through it, I lose my freedom. I live here on your terms. I carry a child for a man I don't know. Yes. But I'm safe. Federal protected. Given care I could never afford on my own. Yes. And after, I have options I currently don't have. Yes. Mira closed her eyes for 3 seconds and let herself see the alternative as clearly as she had been avoiding seeing it. Going back. Another convenience store in another neighborhood. Always looking over her shoulder, waiting for Uncle Tae-sik to find her. Living paycheck to paycheck until the next crisis found her because the next crisis always found people like her. It was the most reliable thing in her life. Or worse, him finding her first. Dragging her back. Finishing what he'd started last night. She opened her eyes. I'll do it. But I have conditions. Min-seok's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. You're negotiating. You said the decision was mine. That implies I have standing in this conversation. She met his gaze directly. My uncle gets handled. Not killed but removed. I need to know he can never reach me again. I want regular updates on the pregnancy. Not just from doctors, from you. If I'm carrying your child, you don't get to be absent for 9 months and collect the result at the end. And if I decide after the birth that I want to be involved in raising this child, I want a genuine voice in that. Not control. Voice. This baby will also be mine. The silence that followed was long enough that Juno, still standing near the door, looked mildly stunned. Then Min-seok extended his hand. Your uncle will be placed in a rehabilitation facility. He will be monitored. He will not contact you again. Weekly health updates delivered directly by me. And co-parenting arrangements should you choose to stay, will be discussed in good faith. His eyes held hers without wavering. Those are my terms in return for yours. Mira looked at his hand, then at his face. She was looking for the thing that would tell her this was performance, the flicker of amusement, the calculation underneath the agreement. She found neither. She found the composed, direct regard of a man whose reputation, she was beginning to understand, was built precisely on meaning what he said. She shook his hand. His grip was warm and certain. "Welcome to the Haewon House," he said. "Try not to find it too strange." It might have been the beginning of a joke. With Kang Min-seok, she genuinely could not tell. The first week was a blur of medical appointments, legal documents dense enough to require 3 separate explanations before she understood what she was signing, and the gradual, disorienting process of learning to inhabit a world that operated by entirely different rules from anything she had previously known. Min-seok remained at a remove during this period. She would see him occasionally, crossing a corridor with his team, visible on the compound's internal monitors, once standing in the garden at an hour when she had not expected anyone to be there. His hands in his pockets, looking at the artificial trees with an expression she could not read from the distance between them. He never spoke to her directly during that first week. She told herself she was relieved. The insemination happened on a Thursday morning. Painless, clinical, over in minutes, followed by 30 minutes of lying still on the examination table while the medical staff moved efficiently around her. When they left and she was alone, Mira stared at the ceiling and tried to locate exactly what she was feeling, which turned out to be too many things layered too closely together to name individually. She thought about her mother, who had left her at 17 to the care of a man she should never have trusted. She thought about the convenience store and the colleagues who would by now have noticed her absence. She thought about the child that might or might not be beginning inside her body at this very moment, and what kind of world it would be born into. She thought that she either had or hadn't just made the most consequential decision of her life. 2 weeks later, the test came back positive. She was in the garden when Juno found her with the result, sitting on a stone bench with a book open in her lap that she had not been reading for the last hour. She set the book down and held the piece of paper and felt everything and nothing simultaneously, the specific emotional weather of a moment that is too large to respond to in any single way. "Congratulations." She looked up to find Min-seok standing several feet away. He had apparently received the news before her. Of course he had. "Are you well?" "I genuinely don't know," Mira said. And then, because the situation was so entirely surreal and her defenses had been replaced by something more fragile and honest. "I'm pregnant with your baby and I don't know your favorite food." Something moved across his face. "Rice," he said. "Plain, specifically. Everything else is distraction." "That is the most unsurprising answer you could have given." He moved to the opposite end of the bench and stood there, not sitting, just present, as though he was testing the distance between them and had not yet decided on the correct measurement. "Are you frightened?" "Yes." "Are you?" He was quiet for long enough that it became an answer of its own kind. She looked at him sideways. "Why did you really choose me? Not the version Juno gives. Yours." The garden held its cultivated, underground quiet around them. When Min-seok finally spoke, his voice had lost the particular controlled flatness it usually carried. "My mother was like you," he said. "Young. Without resources. She came from nothing and was offered something that looked like safety and was something else entirely. My father saw her and decided she was useful. She bore me, raised me through my earliest years, and then she tried to leave. Pause that had weight in it. He would not allow it." Mira did not speak. "I became what this position required me to become," Min-seok continued, his eyes on the artificial trees. "But I swore that whatever I built would not repeat what he was. I don't want a woman here out of ambition or strategy or because she was prepared for this life. I want someone who chooses it with full knowledge of what it costs." He finally looked at her directly. "You stumbled into that room with nothing, told the truth about what had been done to you, and when offered resources asked what was expected of you rather than how much you would receive. That is who I needed. And I will not do to you what my father did to my mother. You will always have a choice here, Mira. I will not allow that to change. Mira sat with those words for a long moment. Then, because there was nothing adequate to say to them and because she understood they were true, she simply nodded. Thank you, she said quietly, for telling me that. He nodded once, and they sat together in the underground garden in silence that was, for the first time, something closer to comfortable than strange. The first trimester was brutal in the most unglamorous way possible. Morning sickness arrived like something that had been waiting for an invitation and had decided not to wait for one. It hit Mira for weeks. Nausea in relentless patient waves that cared nothing for the time of day or whatever she had recently eaten or her personal feelings about the whole situation. She spent most of it in her room or in the garden when the air helped, emerging for medical appointments and not much else. Min-seok kept his word about the updates. He appeared every few days in the evening with the regularity of someone who had scheduled it and was not the kind of person who missed scheduled commitments. The conversations were brief at first. Clinical. How are you feeling? What did the doctors say? Is there anything you need? Then, somewhere around week 6, Mira looked at him across the small sitting area of her room and said, I need tteokbokki. He looked up from the document he had brought with him. The medical team recommended bland foods. The medical team is not currently growing your heir inside their body, Mira said. Extra gochugaru, fish cakes. The real sauce, not the mild version. Min-seok stared at her for a beat that stretched slightly longer than necessary. You're making demands. I'm making a reasonable request to the father of my child. There is a distinction. She met his gaze without flinching. I have given up my freedom, my privacy, my entire previous life, and the uninterrupted use of my own ribcage. You can arrange tteokbokki. Something crossed his face that she had not seen there before. Not quite amusement. The ghost of it. He reached for his phone without further comment and made a call. 20 minutes later, the kind of tteokbokki that Mira had not eaten since the last good day she could remember arrived in her sitting room, prepared with the specific precision of someone who had been told to get it exactly right. She ate with single-minded focus. Min-seok watched with an expression that she was beginning to identify as his version of fascinated. You're not what I expected, he said. Nobody ever is, Mira said, pulling a fish cake off the skewer. Wait until the 3rd trimester. I've heard things. His lips moved. It was not a full smile, but it was the architecture of one. After that, something shifted in the space between them, the way temperature shifts in a room when someone opens a window. Not dramatic, but definitively changed. His visits grew longer. The silences became less pointed. They began to talk in the way that people talk when they have stopped performing neutrality at each other. About his work, about the compound and the operation she was gradually learning the shape of, about her degree she had never finished and the literature she had been reading since she arrived. You could enroll online, he said one evening. It was so direct and so practical that she blinked. While pregnant. Your brain continues functioning during pregnancy. The estate has full library access and unrestricted internet. You're here regardless. He looked at her evenly. Why not use the time? She looked into university enrollment the next morning. Within the week she was registered for 2 courses, literature and African history, studying between medical appointments and the ongoing negotiation with her own nausea, and it gave her something that the months of waiting had been quietly taking from her. The sense that she was still becoming something, that the life inside her was not the only thing moving forward. The 2nd trimester brought relief from the nausea and a new set of physical indignities that Mira documented with the dry, matter-of-fact narration she had discovered was her primary coping mechanism. Her body changed faster than she could keep up with. Her back ached with a persistence she found almost impressive. She developed cravings that ranged from entirely reasonable to the kind that she described to Min-seok one evening and watched him process with visible effort. The night she woke at 3 in the morning craving jjajangmyeon and wandered the compound looking for the kitchen, she found him. He was in his office surrounded by documents, his shirt collar open, looking like a man who had been awake for much longer than was advisable, the specific tiredness of someone carrying decisions that do not lighten when the building goes quiet. He looked up when she appeared in the doorway. You should be asleep. The baby is extremely active at 3 in the morning, Mira said. I need noodles. The doctors. The baby does not care what the doctors think. She leaned against the door frame and looked at him. What's keeping you up? A territorial dispute in Incheon. 3 families, 1 port, insufficient goodwill between any of them. He rubbed his eyes with the heel of his hand. People may die if I don't resolve it before morning. And you're trying to make sure they don't. That is generally the preferable outcome. Mira considered him for a moment. This man who ran an empire and was currently trying to prevent deaths at 3 in the morning instead of sleeping, who had pressed a call button without argument because she needed noodles, who had told her things about his mother in a garden that she was fairly certain he had not told many other people. She said, "You're going to figure it out." He looked at her. "You don't know anything about the situation." "No. But I know you're still working on it instead of going to sleep, which means you haven't decided it's unsolvable yet." She pushed off the door frame. "Can you order the noodles from here?" He pressed a button on his desk. They sat together while the compound hummed quietly around them. Her with her jajangmyeon, him with his documents and his impossible decisions. And the quiet between them had a texture that Mira could not immediately name but which felt, in the most unexpected and inconvenient way, like something she wanted to hold on to. "Why did you become this?" she asked eventually. "The iron chair. The whole of it. I was born to it." He set down his pen. "My father built it. When he died I was 23 and entirely unprepared, and I had 2 choices. Become what the position demanded or watch everything collapse into war. There was no third option. So you became someone else. I chose to survive the role. The person I was before it would not have survived a week inside it." Mira set down her chopsticks. "Do you miss him? The person you were before?" The silence that followed was the longest he had ever given a question of hers. "Every day," he said, and it came out quieter than everything else he had said, stripped of the iron chair's particular controlled flatness, just a man being honest about something that cost him something to say. Without thinking too carefully about it, Mira reached across the desk and put her hand on his. He went still. The specific stillness of someone who has not been touched with simple kindness in a very long time and does not immediately know what to do with it. "I don't think he's as gone as you believe," she said. "I think he shows up in small ways that you don't let yourself name. The way you kept your promise about updates. The way you ordered tteokbokki without making me justify it. The way you're sitting here at 3 in the morning trying to save people you could just let a dispute take." Min-seok looked at her hand on his for a moment. Then, carefully, he turned his own hand over and held hers. Just for a moment. Then he let go. "Go back to bed," he said quietly. "You need the rest." She went. But she carried the warmth of it back through the corridor with her and could not set it down. The confrontation came at 6 months. Mira was in the garden with a book for her literature course when the alarms went off, a sound she had never heard in the compound before. Low and urgent and spreading through the building like a current. Guards materialized from 3 directions, weapons drawn, moving toward the main entrance with the coordinated efficiency of people who had rehearsed this. Juno appeared beside her. "Come with me. Now." "What's happening?" His face told her before his words did. "Your uncle found you." The cold that moved through her was total. They rushed through the corridors to a secure monitoring room lined with screens showing multiple angles of the compound's entrance. On the feeds, Mira could see Uncle Tae-sik, older looking than she remembered, or perhaps it was the camera, or perhaps it was simply that she was seeing him now from a distance that let her see him clearly for the first time. He was with 2 men she didn't recognize, all 3 of them shouting at the guards who held the entrance line. And in front of the guards, calm as winter water, stood Min-seok. "Audio," Juno said. "My niece." Uncle Tae-sik's voice came through, ragged and thick. "She's my responsibility. You have no right. She is here by her own choice," Min-seok replied, his voice carrying clearly without being raised at all. "She signed documentation confirming this. Witnessed and filed. You have no legal standing here." "Legal?" Uncle Tae-sik's face contorted. You think I care about legal? She's family. Owes me. After everything I did for her. After I took her in when no one else would. You took her in and spent 7 years taking from her, Min-seok said, with a particular quietness that was more cutting than volume. What you describe as care was extraction. And now you've arrived at my gates expecting me to return her to that. I won't. Uncle Tae-sik's expression shifted then. She recognized the shift, had learned it over years, the moment he realized the direct approach was failing and recalculated. I'll go to the press. Tell them you kidnapped a young woman. I'll make you a problem iron chair. And even you can't silence every journalist in. You are standing at my gates, Min-seok said, and there was something in his voice now that was different, something underneath the control that had weight to it. Threatening me with my men around you, with documented evidence of years of abuse on your account, in front of a facility that has treated the injuries you caused. Please. Continue. In the monitoring room, Mira's hands were shaking. She knew what came next if she stayed here. He would keep trying. He would find other angles. He would not stop, because men like Uncle Tae-sik never stopped when they believed they were owed something. And he had believed she was owed to him since the day she arrived at 17 with her mother's death still sitting in her chest and nowhere else to go. I need to go out there, she said. Absolutely not, Juno said immediately. He will not accept it from Min-seok. He needs to hear it from me. Her voice was steady in a way her hands were not. That I chose this. That he has nothing over me anymore. He needs to hear it from me directly or he will never stop. Juno looked at her for a long moment. Then he made a call. 2 minutes later she was being walked to the entrance, flanked by guards, into the late afternoon gray of a Seoul sky that had not decided whether to rain. When she came through the gate, Uncle Tae-sik's face moved through shock, relief, and then the particular expression she knew best, the one that calculated instantly how to use what was in front of him. Mira, sweetheart. You're all right. Let's go home. Whatever these people have told you. No. The word came out of her clean and entire. She stood as straight as 6 months of pregnancy would allow and met his eyes across the distance. I'm not going anywhere with you. Chose to stay here. I signed documents saying so. And I am telling you directly so you cannot misrepresent it. I choose this. I choose not to go back. I choose never to see you again. You don't know what you're. I know exactly what I'm saying. Her voice rose and steadied simultaneously. You stole from me. You hit me. You spent 7 years telling me I owed you for the basic fact of being sheltered. And last week her voice caught. You crossed a line that you knew you were crossing. And I fought back. And I ran. And I am not coming back. Uncle Tae-sik's face went through several expressions before settling on the one she had feared most. The calculated, cornered ugliness of someone who has nothing left but cruelty. He took a step forward. Every guard raised their weapons simultaneously. And Min-seok stepped between them. He moved without urgency, placing himself between Mira and her uncle with the calm of someone doing something that has already been decided. He looked at Uncle Tae-sik with an expression that Mira had not seen directed at her since she arrived. Not the version of him that had been slowly, carefully becoming something more human in a garden and an office and a sitting room over months. The version underneath it. The one that had survived becoming the iron chair because it had no other option. You've said what you came to say, Min-seok told Uncle Tae-sik. She has said what she needed you to hear. We're done. You can't keep her from her family. She has told you she is choosing to stay. If you contact her again, approach this compound again, or speak publicly about her or anything you think you know about this facility, I will not send guards. I will come myself. Was the specificity of the silence that followed it. Take him to the rehabilitation center in Suwon, he said to the men behind him. Ensure the program is completed in full. Ensure he understands the parameters of his situation. Uncle Tae-sik was still shouting something as they took him. The sound faded down the driveway and then was gone and the entrance was quiet. The gray Seoul afternoon unchanged, indifferent, continuous. Mira stood and felt her legs decide they were finished. Min-seok caught her before she reached the ground. His arms were careful and certain, adjusting to her weight and the changed shape of her body without hesitation, and she pressed her face against his shoulder and felt the full accumulated weight of 7 years break open in her chest at once, for the girl who had arrived at 17 with her mother's death and no one to take care of her properly. For the years of managing him and minimizing it and telling herself it was survivable because it was and because she had no other story to inhabit. For the woman she had been becoming in spite of all of it, in the small private hours of the night shifts and the literature she read and the degree she had been trying and failing to finish. Min-seok held her through all of it, one hand supporting her back, one hand at the back of her head, murmuring something quiet and repeated that she could not entirely hear but which carried, simply by its consistency, exactly what she needed it to carry. When she finally steadied, he carried her inside without asking whether she wanted him to. He brought her to her room, set her on the bed, and sat beside her in the specific stillness of someone who has decided to stay. "Thank you," she managed. "For all of it. For everything since the night I came in. You told the truth when it was easier not to," he said quietly. "Everything else followed from that." She looked at him, this complicated, guarded, gradually opening man sitting beside her with the remains of the iron chair's composure and something far less controlled underneath it. She reached for his hand. He let her take it. They stayed like that while the afternoon light changed and the compound settled back into its quiet, and Mira understood, with a particular clarity that comes from having been through something too large to pretend away, that what she felt for this man was no longer the gratitude of someone who had been given safety. It was something considerably more inconvenient, considerably more real, and she had absolutely no idea what to do with it yet. The third trimester was its own particular education in discomfort. Mira's body expanded beyond what she had believed the human form was capable of accommodating. Sleep became a nightly negotiation between her back, her hips, the baby, and the various configurations of pillows that Juno eventually stopped questioning and simply continued supplying. Her ribs were a grievance. Her ankles were a memory. Through it all Min-seok became, gradually and then entirely, a constant. He came in the evenings, sometimes with documents, sometimes without. He sat in the chair across from her or on the end of the bench in the garden and they talked, about his work, about her courses, about philosophy and power and what mercy meant inside a world that rarely rewarded it. She told him about her mother. He told her about the years after his father died, the 23-year-old who had stood in this compound and tried to become someone capable of holding an empire together through sheer refusal to show fear. "You're different than you were," she said one evening 8 months in. She was propped on an impractical number of pillows and entirely beyond caring. "When I first arrived here you were, I don't know, very far away. Even when you were in the room. You were a variable I needed to assess," he said. "And now?" He looked at her for a moment. "Now you are the person I come to this room to see." She held his gaze. "That's a very careful way of saying something." "I am a careful person. Min-seok." She said his name directly. "I am 8 months pregnant and I have no patience left for careful. Say the thing." Something in him shifted. "Pin. I was not prepared for you," he said. "For who you are. For the way you refuse to be diminished by any of this. Not by the arrangement, not by the compound, not by what I am or what I asked of you. You built a life here. You studied. You made the staff laugh. You made me laugh, which I had stopped believing was something I was capable of. You called me on the things I was avoiding and you did it without cruelty." He looked at his hands, then at her. "I am not good at this. Whatever this is. But I find myself very unwilling to imagine the version of this compound where you are not in it." Mira looked at him for a long moment. "For an incredibly powerful and feared man," she said, "that was the most cautious declaration I have ever heard." He almost smiled. She had come to love the almost smiles. They felt earned in a way that full ones never quite did. She reached across and covered his hand with hers. His fingers turned and held on, the way they had that night in his office when she had put her hand on his shoulder and he had held it for exactly 1 moment before letting go. This time he did not let go. I think I've been falling in love with you since the tteokbokki, she said. He looked at her. Something crossed his face that was not the iron chair, and was not the controlled professional, and was not even the guarded, gradually opening man she had come to know. It was just a person. Present, uncertain, wanting something in a way they have stopped knowing how to ask for. That seems early, he said. You ordered it without arguing. She squeezed his hand. It was extremely effective. This time he smiled. Fully. It arrived slowly and it changed his whole face, and she understood why it was so rare. Because it was the kind of smile that gave everything away, that left nothing managed or contained. That was simply true. She leaned her head against his shoulder. He let her. The underground garden breathed its artificial oxygen around them, and somewhere above, Seoul continued being Seoul, vast and brilliant, and entirely unaware that two people had arrived at something in its depths that neither of them had planned for. The birth was the most difficult night of Mira's life, and also, in its way, the most clarifying. Her water broke at 2 a.m, 3 weeks before the due date, and within an hour the compound's medical suite was fully activated. Doctors, nurses, equipment she had been vaguely aware of during her prenatal appointments now arranged with urgent precision. Pain arrived and did not leave, wave after relentless wave, and time dissolved into contractions and breathing instructions and the specific animal work of a body doing something enormous. Min-seok was there. He should not have been. The medical staff said so, twice, with the particular diplomatic firmness of people who know they are not going to win the argument but feel professionally obligated to make it. He dismissed both attempts without looking away from Mira and sat beside her through all of it, through the hours when she gripped his hand hard enough to leave marks, through the moments when she told him in very clear terms exactly what she thought of him and this entire situation, through the small, exhausted gaps between contractions when she was simply a person trying to get through the next 10 minutes. You're doing extraordinarily well, he said during one of the gaps. Don't patronize me, she said without heat. Tell me something real. He looked at her. I'm frightened. She laughed, which she had not expected to be capable of. Me too. You're stronger than I am. Different kind of strong. Another contraction building. She tightened her grip on his hand. Stay. I'm not going anywhere. He meant it. He stayed. And then, after hours that felt like a separate country entirely, a cry split the medical suite air and the doctor's voice said, It's a girl. The world stopped. Mira felt it stop and felt time do something strange. Compress and expand simultaneously, the way it does at moments that divide everything into before and after. The baby was placed in her arms and she was perfect. Tiny and furious and entirely herself. Dark hair still damp, hands balled into small fists, crying with the full commitment of someone who has arrived somewhere and found it not to their immediate satisfaction. Hello, Mira whispered. Her voice was wrecked and she did not care at all. Hello, baby girl. I'm your mother. I have been waiting so long to tell you that. Min-seok stood beside her looking at the infant with an expression she had never seen on him. Something beyond composure. Beyond control. Something that was simply wonder and fear. And the particular quality of a person encountering the one thing they were not prepared for regardless of how prepared they believed themselves to be. She's so small, he said. She's exactly the right size. Mira looked up at him. Do you want to hold her? It was the first time in all the months she had known him that she saw him hesitate out of something other than strategy. May I? She transferred the baby into his arms carefully. Watched him receive her. Watched his hands adjust, the same hands that ran an empire and had held her through a night when she had fallen apart, now cradling something 6 pounds and furious and entirely new, and finding the right shape for it with a gentleness that seemed to surprise him as much as it moved her. What should we name her? Mira asked. He looked at his daughter's face for a long time. His expression moved through several things and settled into something soft and decided. Sora, he said. It means sky. Something open. Something without limits. Sora, Mira repeated. It was right in the way that some words are immediately right, the moment you hear them. Hello, Sora. Welcome to the world. Your father is going to be extraordinarily overprotective, and your mother is going to teach you to negotiate your way out of it. Min-seok's laugh was quiet and entirely real. I make no promises about the overprotective. I know. She reached up and touched his face briefly. I'm counting on it. They remained there in the medical suite while the staff moved around them, completing the necessary work of post-birth care. Two people who had arrived at each other through impossible circumstances, holding the small, entirely ordinary miracle of a life they had made. Whatever the compound held. Whatever came next. Whatever the world above still required of the iron chair, and whoever he was deciding to be underneath that title. They would face it, Mira thought, with this girl between them who had been named for open sky. That seemed like enough. That seemed, in fact, like everything. 2 months later, Mira stood in the garden in the early morning, Sora asleep against her chest in a carrier, looking at the artificial trees with new eyes. She had been thinking about what came next. The arrangement had said 1 year. Reassessment after 1 year. She had always known it was coming and had told herself it was fine, that she would take the financial provision and find her own way. That attachment was a complication she would manage. She had not managed it. Min-seok found her there, as he often did in the mornings now, moving quietly through the garden until he was beside her, looking at Sora's sleeping face with the expression he wore exclusively for her. Open in a way he wore for nothing and no one else. I've been thinking, Mira said. About what? She looked at him. About the 1 year. About reassessment. About staying. He was very still. Not because of the arrangement, she continued. Not because of the resources or the safety or any of the things that were true at the beginning. Because of this. She adjusted Sora gently. Because of her. And because of you. And because I have spent months becoming someone I actually recognize, and I did it here, and I don't think I'm finished. Min-seok looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached out and tucked a loose piece of her hair back carefully. And his hand stayed against her face, and she leaned into it. Stay, he said. Just that. Quiet and certain and without condition. Okay, she said. Above them, somewhere beyond the compound and the amber lighting and the artificial trees, Seoul was waking up into another ordinary morning. Indifferent and brilliant and continuing, the way cities do, regardless of the extraordinary things happening in their depths. Mira looked at the man beside her and the daughter between them and thought, this is not what I would have chosen. If someone had told her 2 years ago what the map of her life was going to look like, she would not have believed it and would not have wanted it. But she had run out of her uncle's apartment with nothing, into a Seoul night that was cold and indifferent and full of rain, and somehow she had run directly into the life that was waiting for her. She held Sora a little closer. She let Min-seok take her hand. She stayed. If this story had you up at night wanting to reach through the screen and shake both of them into honesty sooner, drop a comment and tell me exactly when you started losing patience. And if you made it all the way here, you are K-Afro Diary family now, and we don't let family miss out. Subscribe and turn on your notifications because the next story is already on its way. See you there.